here. This week's podcast is entitled UK Media Snakes and Ladders Journey Around the 7 Stages of Grief Model since 2020, Episode 61. Introduction. I start off this podcast with a slide showing the model, 7 Stages of Grief, and in the article it is also the first image. In summary, the 7 stages are shock, initial paralysis, is hearing the bad news, denial, trying to avoid the inevitable, anger, frustrated outpouring of bottled up emotion, bargaining, seeking in vain for a way out, depression, final realization of the inevitable, testing, seeking realistic solutions, and acceptance, finally finding the way forward. In 2020, I did a podcast for Meganpedia where I went through all of those 7 stages and gave a commentary on where the royal family and royal reporters were at in each of those stages. I did the same in 2021, and I have done the same again for August 22, and I will revisit it at the end of the year. I'm not going to go through each of the 7 stages for 2020 or 2021. They've been done before, and they are included in the article in detail. I will, however, refer again to that model right at the end of the podcast, and I will go through my thoughts on each of those 7 stages in 2022. And as I said, I'm not going to read out all of it, but I will give you a summary of each of the sections, and you'll be able to see all the detail of all the 3 years in the article. Before that, I'm going to go through my thoughts on a number of topics, and combined they cover the Kubler Ross model. And then I will finish, as I said, in the article with a chart with them side by side so you can read across at each section. So for shock, you can just go across to the right and you will see details for each of the 3 years. So I've pulled them all together in one place for you to see. I have also included full copies of my 2020 and 2021 thoughts on the model and the behaviour of royal reporters. So it is there as well. So you'll have all 3 separately, and then you'll have the combined. So here we go. Following on from previous comments relating to where I considered the royal reporters to be on the Kubler Ross 7 Stages of Grief model in 2020, I thought it was worthwhile doing an update due to all the craziness that has gone on under the guise of professional soundbites. But when, in reality, nothing could be described as professional behaviour in the UK media world. I have drawn upon a number of reference sources for the opinions I state, and as my way of podcasting, I back up my opinions based on research of such behaviour or outcomes previously in similar settings. I will also draw upon a small publication of my own published in 2019 and extrapolate out from the evidence and thoughts on the direction of travel that was being indicated at the time and whether or not any of those predictions became reality. In that publication, I looked at the regulatory frameworks in place and how useful they were in terms of the content in the media, particularly the printed media. This podcast will briefly look at the effectiveness of industry, which is self-regulating, and the reactions of UK media towards anything that the Sussexes have been involved in since stepping back from senior royal duties, as well as the vitriolic tabloid content before the Sussexes stepped back, despite vowing that the Sussexes would be irrelevant once they stepped back from royal duties. I will track their movement to and from various stages of the Stages of Grief model, linked to how they have reacted daily in terms of the coverage and the methodologies used to try and secure information about Sussex activity, as well as write clickbait headlines in a way that garner emotive responses from sufficient members of the public. And possibly even, in their dreams, they wish the Sussexes themselves. Let's have a look briefly at the regulatory framework, otherwise known as IPSO, the Independent Press Standards Organisation. IPSO is the independent regulator of the newspaper and magazine industry in the UK. The description of this organisation being independent is laughable. I had spent over a year researching various activities relating to UK media with the intention of submitting it to IPSO, but it became quite clear throughout that research journey that it would be a waste of time. The hurdles and tribulations I encountered in that research journey prompted me to publish a book using a selection of information from the research. The book, if you can call it that, was turned around and ready for sale within 3 months. It is not my usual standard, but at the time I needed something out in the public domain quickly, as there were indications that I was going to be stopped. I won't say any more on that aspect, but let's just say we didn't have the receipts databases that we have now, and I wanted something to be out in the public domain and certain institutions in case of any reprisals, as there was clear evidence of such actions being imminent. My findings then, and remain today, that the professional body meant to scrutinise and standards and ethical codes, etc., was not as independent as one would think. And to add salt to injury, the percentage of successful outcomes for complainants at the time was in single figures. I have not looked at what the figures are like since, as I have no faith in the organisation anyway, and knowing the content of what is published now in UK media and in televised form, it is worse than when I began my research activities, under many guises over that period, for my own safety. The situation appears to me to be like a private club with entitled members who all come together and protect each other's existence. Where have we heard that before? In summary, the main areas of responsibilities are as follows: to hold newspapers and magazines to account for their actions, protect individual rights, uphold high standards of journalism, help to maintain freedom of expression of the press. In summary, the IPSO main activities are as follows: make sure that newspapers and magazines follow the editor code. By the way, I've put a link for that in the reference sources rather than go through it here. Make newspapers publish corrections or adjudication if breach found. Monitor press standards and regulations of newspapers and magazines, who in turn have to submit an annual statement of how they followed the code. Investigate serious standard failings. They can fine publishers up to £1 million if serious and systemic activity is uncovered. Operates a 24-hour anti-harassment advice line. Provide training and guidance for journalists so that they can uphold highest possible standards. Provide whistleblowing hotline for journalists who feel pressure to act in such a way that is not in line with the editor's code. Work with charities, NGOs, non-profit organisations and other organisations to support and improve press standards. How is IPSO funded? IPSO, funded by the Regulatory Funding Company, which is funded by member publications. IPSO carries out its work separately and completely independently from its members. My views on the funding mechanism: it should come as no surprise that very few complaints result in success, when the people who fund IPSO are the very same printed media and publications who people are complaining about. It is like asking turkeys to vote for Christmas. Independent. Yeah, right. It is about as useful as a deterrent as the editor's code, which you'll see if you look it up in the reference. Office of Communications, Ofcom. Ofcom is the regulator for the communications services that we use and rely on each day. Help to make sure that people across the UK are satisfied with what they see and hear on TV and radio, and that programmes reflect the audiences they serve. Consider every complaint received from viewers and listeners. Investigate further and sometimes find broadcasters in breach of the rules. Independent and funded by fees by the companies they regulate. Next section. What level, standard of education is required to be a member of the Royal Rota? In the article, at the end, there is one of the reference sources, a list of journalism degree entry requirements in the UK. I just skipped through it here in this summary, but you'll see a table where it outlines all of them. And no doubt you will form an opinion on that, as I will quote mine at some point in this podcast. I talk about UCAS tariff points here, and as I said, in the reference sources, that's all laid out clearly for you to be able to compare with similar requirements for similar professions in your respective countries. Right, in terms of the UK, the minimum UCAS tariff points to study journalism ranges from 80 points, where it would be a grade C or grade D and grade D. So they're normally 3 A levels that people take, but you can take more, around 4 to 5 maximum, but it's generally 3. So 80 points with grades of C and 2 Ds at A level, to 128 points, tariff points, if you have an A and 2 Bs at A level, and the average being 112 points, 2 Bs and a C at A level. Can I just sort of say here, because when I looked at this, I thought this was low, and I'm only basing that on what my 2 children did when they were applying for university, and as a minimum they required 3 A's. There was no sort of element of possibly 1 B with some universities, but it's 2 A's and a B. And here we are in terms of a journalism degree where a C and 2 D's is possible. I'm not saying everywhere, but you could get into some universities apparently with a C and 2 D's. And let me just say that top universities, particularly the top quartile, the top 25 in the UK, there would be no D's in any of the levels of requirements, not even on a bad day. So straight away, I formed an opinion of those who went into journalism in the UK. I mean, I don't know how it was years ago, but if that's the current standard, it's not great, in my opinion. And I kind of feel that Royal Rota is probably not even as good as that, or rather they must have it somewhere, maybe at C and Ds, I don't know, but I wasn't impressed by that. Just knowing that at the time, as I said, which is some time ago now, when my children were going and putting applications forward for universities, all of them required 3 A's. That's to start with. I was lucky that my two did extra A-levels and also took some exams a year early. They're bright enough to do it, and so they were fortunate. So ultimately, obviously, their points are going to be a lot higher than that. But I was still surprised to see the grading system and what you could actually be admitted to a university to do a journalism degree was as low as that. Having said that, there are lots of universities out there, but they're not all good. But that's another story. Right. For applicants with A-levels, universities don't need to require you to have studied any specific subjects in preparation for this degree. Typically, subjects such as general studies and critical thinking are excluded and cannot be counted as part of the points total. BTECs are accepted by most universities for a journalism degree. Some universities require a BTEC national or extended diploma in a related subject, but this varies heavily from university to university. Applicants would need at least 3 Ds for some of the universities, but it is still possible to secure a place at some universities with as little as 2 subjects at a pass. As I've mentioned, my personal verdict on these entry requirements is that top universities require much higher entry levels than any of those stated above, and they do not offer a designated journalism degree from what I could find. A degree from a top university on any topic from a top UK university would be most welcome, I am sure, in any news media, not least because the skills that a top university would expect throughout the lifetime of any of their degrees would surpass most of what is on display in the tabloid field, and even less, I suspect, within the Royal Rota. I have no proof of that, and life is too short to dig deeper on that topic. If most of them are qualified to that level, it definitely is not asked for day to day in their working environment. I did come across one Royal reporter who did attend one of the top 25 universities, and as much as the bigoted views that are on display most of the time, at least I am certain that that individual would easily find work elsewhere when, not if, the Royal Rota is reduced in size. It is only a matter of time. It is not if, it's when. The business model for the number and declared specialisms within that group is not based on need or necessity. Royal reporters, are they necessary or even relevant? Before I go on to the question, the need for Royal reporters, both in numbers or the need for a specialist group, let me quote a few facts about the proliferation of articles written by these so-called specialists over a few stated periods. Articles which all contain the Duchess of Sussex's name, or rather mainly her maiden name, but none of the UK media have ever shown any respect to the marriage that took place in 2018, and have continued to use her maiden name or derivatives of it most of the time. That is not done with any other senior royal, or for that matter, any other female member of the royal family. According to the records of one tabloid publication, they published over 7,000 articles, including the name of Meghan Markle, between 2016 to May 2019. For only the month of May 2019, that same paper published 451 articles containing the name of the Duchess of Sussex. One could describe that as being obsessive, or fixated, or even stalker-like. None of those descriptions could be described as healthy or of an acceptable standard for any publication, particularly one that can be viewed online by a global audience. The head of the UK royal family, or the rest of the senior royals, come nowhere near that total in any similar timescale. None of the articles were positive, and it could be argued that much of this content is in breach of several codes, and none of them were ever challenged by the industry bodies, who should be protecting victims of such activity, not just those who are employed in the newspaper and magazine industry. It is worthy of note that the Duchess of Sussex had been on maternity leave since the end of March, and yet every single day her name appeared in media headlines, and none of it positive. Not even on maternity leave was this member of that family, in particular senior royals, had that type of scrutiny, and certainly not such hateful stories. Frequent interviews with toxic people and royal reporters pontificating with each other in a newly produced TV programme, discussing their disdain with the Sussexes and making assumptions that it must be the Duchess of Sussex behind it all. No other senior royals had their health and safety put at risk by the actions of the newspaper industry since Princess Diana, and none have had to move house because their privacy and safety was compromised by the actions of royal reporters. Earlier that year, there was a court ruling which confirmed that fact. Yet not one royal reporter made any mention in their respective tabloids that day or since. In previous weeks and months, those same reporters wrote report after report about the location of the property, including publishing the postcode of the said property and displaying photos they purchased from the helicopter company, who to this day no one is admitting to chartering or being involved in some way. The Sussexes took court action, and as stated, they were successful. The images included images of inside the property, including a bedroom, and also various details which compromised the security of the building. A similar course of action took place in Canada, and then again in the USA, when the tabloids found out details of the location from the UK royal family, and then printed the location in their publications, where once again paparazzi appeared in the vicinity for weeks. Findings, re. the Royal Reporter, or Royal Rota reporters. Double standards. Newspapers printing information as fact with no checking. TV presenters to continue to bully, harass the Duchess of Sussex, and gave platforms to those who did the same. Duchess of Sussex was blamed for practically everything that is not going well in the world. Royal reporters posted things on social media platforms and then tried to hide behind the excuse that they are their personal views, and yet include the name of their newspaper title in their bio and in their social media handles. One QC publicly stated concerns about the racist tones of the articles relating to the Duchess of Sussex. The immediate response, literally within a few minutes of it being posted, from one of the royal reporters was to state that the articles did and do contain an element of racist tones, but that racist tones are not against the law. Receipts exist for these two tweets. Royal reporters are now publicly posting things on social media expressing frustration at their falling income and that they are in real need of a pay rise. Strange, when they were actively being cruel towards the Sussexes, particularly the Duchess of Sussex, the money was obviously flowing in, so there were no public outcries about pay increases. Since the Sussexes now live on another continent, the Raw reporters have continued to pursue this non-UK funded couple and still produce articles without zero facts and still make some money. Clearly, more than they make from the rest of the British royal family combined. Otherwise, they would spend their days writing about the people they are paid to write about. The more hate-filled or negative or outrageous articles on the Sussexes written each day, the more engagement they attract and earn more than the coppers earned from anything produced about the golden, revered UK royal family. Now, royal reporters have fallen to scurrying around looking for a possible scandal or interesting tale to spin in UK tabloids about the Sussex family. As a result, we now have had articles on the brown lawns at the Sussex home due to reduced rainfall, and the latest batch of whole articles about wild animals roaming around their grounds at night. This is what the royal reporters are reduced to writing about now, and they fail to see how embarrassing they look to the rest of the world, and in particular, reporters out there. The royal reporters and their editors also fail to see that every time an article is published about the Sussexes, all the tabloids writing about the same things, it further devalues the need for a UK monarchy, and definitely the need to have a dedicated group of individuals who either write fiction or lies or normal Californian movement of animals in the county, and all to a team who receive a salary for such nonsense. To add salt to these wounded egos, the royal reporters have recently publicly stated that they are concerned about the lack of pay, as they are suffering financially to do their job. As I've already stated, as the majority of their time is not spent on the family they are meant to write about, there is clearly no need for the royal reporter team. Definitely they do not warrant any type of pay increase for the fact-free tales they spin every day. That is not journalism. Conclusions. The royal rota system is unnecessary, and the content and methods used to pursue a couple who live on another continent and who receive no UK funds is damaging to the UK monarchy and the relationship with the Commonwealth and the wider international community. The content of all articles is unnecessarily toxic and bitter in tone. Royal reporters went out of their way in the first 3 months of 2020 to state at every opportunity that the Sussexes were irrelevant and that no one would write about them April 2020 onwards, and went as far as stating that the rest of the British royal family disowned them from that month onwards. That promise never materialised, and here we are in 2022 reading toxic fairy tales and lies in what is described as newspapers and what is also described as journalism. If a team has been put together to write about the tax-funded royals, and for the last 2 years the majority of their topics pertain to another couple outside of that description, then the said team is obsolete. Will the UK monarchy need to change its style and relevance to the people if it is to have a chance of longevity? It is no longer sufficient to be a figurehead for projects and initiatives. British royal family needs to be actively involved in the lifetime of projects with tangible outcomes along the way. Not acceptable to launch something and then disappear during the lifetime of that project. Self-regulation of the media industry is not working. No newspapers or magazines has to be a member of the regulatory body, though most are members. It gives the impression that members join so that it looks as if they are willing to be regulated. But the reality is that very few cases where action has been taken against any of them. It is abundantly clear that neither the regulatory bodies or their members have a problem with the treatment of the Duchess of Sussex, including continued activity when the Sussexes live on another continent and are not funded by UK taxpayers. Actions against a USA citizen on UK soil for 3 years was beyond wrong, and continued activity against a USA family on USA soil is unwise. The rules of the regulator are just codes of practice. They do not pose a threat to anyone. The regulator seems more focused on protecting its members than actually being impartial as it pretends to be. Recommendations. News teams, including journalists, should reflect the community. Is there a need for a specialist Royal Rota of reporters for what is a continuing smaller number of people in the British royal family? In many professions, professionals are moved around on a regular basis so that there is no potential for unhealthy relationships to develop or any codependency arrangements to emerge. It also ensures that no one can be accused of developing unhealthy or preferential arrangements with anyone. It protects both sides. Right, let's go through the 7 stages of grief model, but I'm only going to be quoting from the sections I wrote counting as of August 2022. As I said, the full details for 2020 and 21 and the full details for this year are included in the article. So, let's look at denial, desperate for answers. Desperate for answers, but nothing seems to have eased the obvious stress between the heirs and equally between the Royal Rota group. The royal family answer is to emulate the Sussexes, both in terms of attire and type of topic that the Sussexes are involved in publicly at that time. The issue for the British royal family is that they appear to have no new ideas of their own, or any ongoing outcomes from projects that they have been running for some years without an update. The image it portrays is that the second in line cannot be seen to be outshone by his younger brother. No one appears to have admitted publicly to this heir that by copying and doing something similar after a Sussex project has been announced does not make the heir stronger or more proficient. It just makes the statement that nothing original is coming from the taxpayer-funded royals, and where the money is being spent. Money is being spent on vanity projects as the heir plays catch-up and is publicised copying his brother. Does not bode well for the future of UK monarchy. There are no questions being asked by the British royal family, and the nation is meant to be impressed by copying and pasting of the non-working royals' work roster, and, to make matters worse, everyone watching from behind their hidden embarrassment for what the British royal family has become, as the copying and pasting is not even done well. It lacks heart, but shouts look at me" vibes. Powerful people request to work with the Sussexes, but the British royal family request to be in spaces of powerful people. The former produces project plans with measurable aims and objectives and timescales. The British Royal Family activity just has many photos taken with apparent important people, and then everyone returns to their day jobs. NB. The Royal Rota have the chance to take photos and write articles that will make everything sound like the second coming of the Holy Spirit. The reality is that there are people in both groups that are surplus to requirements. Let's have a look at the anger stage in 2022. The anger goes deep, and the official line of argument for the continuance of the hunter and prey activity is that Harry and Meghan are still royal. The other tale told most days in the tabloids was that the UK monarchy was not put at risk because Harry and Meghan left, particularly Harry. Apparently, one person leaving with his family was enough to end the monarchy. These double standards that were spoken in the same day sometimes, but certainly within the same weeks. 1 minute they were irrelevant, the next minute the monarchy was going to collapse because one prince left. It speaks volumes about the quality of the people left behind, doesn't it? There are numerous receipts in existence of the Royal Rota declaring the Sussexes would be out on the street without the safety net of royal life. So confident were they, and the royal family, that the Sussexes would beg to return to the fold. When that did not happen, once again a myriad of receipts exist of royal reporters stating that from March 2020 they would not write anything about what the Sussexes did, and that the British royal family have washed their hands of them. Once a dose or two of reality set in, it was clear that the Sussexes were more than surviving, but the British royal family was very clearly floundering. Another reason to question the public assistance for an institution that its own media, who are paid to write about them in a positive way, write more articles per day about the couple who no longer reside in the UK and who are not funded by the UK taxpayer. A couple they spent months writing that no one in the British royal family or royal reporters wanted anything to do with them after they stepped back. Reality has not set in. That if the royal reporters wish to be able to pay their bills, yet writing about the British royal family every day would still come nowhere near the income they receive for articles about one of the Sussexes' engagements, and that is after receiving second or third-hand news via USA news networks. The next stage, sadness and bargaining. Bargaining was never taken seriously. At the Sandringham Summit, Sussexes put forward a way of being involved in some way with the royal duties if needed. All offers were refused, including half-in, half-out arrangement. Now, there are major problems with the remaining publicly funded royals, who were mainly non-working, or near enough to non-working royals, lacked the competence or the charisma needed to garner sufficient interest for people to actually care about their scheduled engagements. The Sussexes were punished and continue to be for daring to step back, and more so for daring to be credible and successful in their endeavours. Now the stage for bargaining is over, not least because when an attempt was made by one of the photographers who has been with them since the start of time, pleaded for Harry to come back to help out Prince William and Prince Charles. He did not request Meghan and the children returned to. He made many telling faux pas, one of which was that if they, royal reporters, had got to know Meghan better, she would have been seen as human. Not sure what species they or he believed she was, but it was not the best way to encourage someone who they bullied and harassed out of the country to return. Jealousy and competitiveness. The jealousy and competitiveness consumes the second in line to embarrassing proportions now, and the Duchess of Cambridge is equally the same. Wearing the exact same clothes from the exact same designers, down to even the matching shoes and hats, is cringeworthy. The Duke copying types of engagements for photo opportunities only. No intention of actually doing any work on any of them, but the need to be seen, to be loved and adored, because he is second in line to the throne. Fragile egos and arrogance and entitlement are off the scale. I would say that this particular stage is one of the most visited by the royal family. Apathy and anger. The anger is very evident still. The royal reporters generally move between jealousy and anger. The British royal family is still angry, but continue to try and pluck another royal or two out of the fold and present them as the next best thing. And each combination has failed, because it is all too obvious that desperation is the reasoning behind all these chronically bad for business, clutching at straws activities. The UK monarchy has never had to actually do anything to prove their value to the public purse. It has always been a given that they would be adored. They are used to the wave and smile royalty and the odd cutting of a ribbon. The Cambridges never worked, or rather attended engagements for a few minutes a week, until Harry and Meghan increased on the things that Harry used to do on his own. And together they have hit the global scene by storm and helped so many organisations and groups in dire need of assistance. The Sussexes work with organisations, and each of those patronages have continued to thrive, and through training programmes they have each gone on to widen their sphere of activity, all with project plans in place, competent staff around them, and quantifiable outcomes, and not a penny of public funding. UK monarchy has never needed to adapt or be measurable before, other than by royal reporters writing favourable things in the papers. Now they are in a real quandary and self-inflicted wounds by chasing out the globally recognised couple through their work projects and not their titles, which they do not use. Royal reporters were confident that royalty was what was needed to bring notoriety, but the Sussexes have proved that tangible results bring success, not tabloid partners writing fluff pieces. Acceptance. Quietly, the British royal family have accepted that they dropped the ball, and having refused every offer that the Sussexes suggested in March 2020, they have gone on to be hugely successful philanthropists and are in demand on a global basis to work with recognised organisations and officials. The Sussex ship has sailed. Let us not forget the treatment towards Sussex children and Meghan. The most disgusting, vile things written about the family, and the KK clan type of endings for the children. Truly vile. Not once has the British royal family ever stepped forward demanding that the media cease. They didn't because they were behind it. Fragile egos being the main reason. There appears to have been no workforce plan, every place or strategic plans, considering more than half of the workforce are beyond the retirement age, one of whom is the next in line for the throne. The second in line has no completed projects to his name over the 20-year period he has been working on them. Does not bode well, as he wants to be adored and popular like his younger brother, without doing any real measurable activity. There is an approximate 10-year gap for the Cambridge children to be considered adults to take on duties. Remains to be seen whether or not they will want to stay in such an institution in the next decade or so. The usual system in UK royalty is to have the standard whipping boy or girl, but it has always been the whipping boy up to now, and then they are discarded when the royal family no longer need them because the next batch of children are now become adult age. In my mind, this was clearly the plan and intention with regard to the Cambridge children, and Harry filling a gap until he was no longer needed, and then he would have been discarded and become like all the sad and tragic figures of UK royal history, of those who were seen as spares and described as spares by the royal community. Thankfully, Harry did not stay to be discarded. He chose his own path for him and his family. The last section, hope. I put in the 2021 area of hope that I saw no evidence of hope, only desperation of a PR team out of ideas and still using a playbook decades out of date. There is an exercise currently underway of returning to old online articles and amending them to contain less criticism of Meghan. These people seem to forget that nothing is erased from the internet, and receipts exist in abundance around the world of the old and the new articles. Sure, they will come in handy when the establishment decide to bring these into the public domain again, because there is no doubt that there is some kind of anticipated action coming up where the UK media want to try and rewrite history. They will not succeed. Receipts exist. I can honestly say, and I probably will, copy and paste that summary for 2021 and paste it into August 2022, because nothing has changed. And to close this podcast, my final thoughts. A new day is dawning. A new king is on the horizon, and there has to be radical changes for the UK monarchy to survive a little longer than it is probably going to. I read a recent article yesterday by a journalist published in the National Union of Journalists on their website. It wasn't published yesterday, just that I saw it yesterday looking for something else. I was not surprised about the content, but I was surprised that it came from a body that surely must be far from happy with the Clown College recruits that make up the Royal Media Circus. I tell you, I feel changes ahead. And never mind the rota intent on asking for more money. Think yourselves lucky that you are all paid at all. because I don't believe that you all will be in the near future. Any demise of the structure of the firm has been helped along by your activity, your meaning Royal Rota, in respect of a family who have no business objectives to cover, and in doing so you erode away at the foundation of a UK monarchy. The erosion of both the Royal Institution and its partners in crime, namely the Royal Rota, is all self-inflicted damage. No amount of reporting or posting on social media platforms trying to change the narrative will change that ultimate fact. To use the analogy of a recent podcast of ours, and it refers to both the royal family and also, in this case, the Royal Rota. You are all slow dancing in a burning room. That's the end of this week's podcast. As usual, I look forward to conversing with you in the comments, and I will be back on air next Sunday. Speak to you soon. Bye from Ivy. Bye.